Hi everybody, thank you for coming today. So this week on The Open Book, we will be discussing the right to privacy. So this week, we engaged with several resources on the topic, including TED Talks, specifically one by Glenn Greenwald on why privacy matters, and another one titled I Have Nothing to Hide, which was held at the Amity University in Dubai. And we also looked at a law case study concerning the actors Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones, as well as other several resources that can be found on our website.
Moving on, in terms of the agenda today, the talking points will be around 15 minutes each, and we will try to get in as much as possible, but around 15 minutes we'll move on to the next point. So I'm just going to go through the points now. So the first one is, should public figures like royals or celebrities have less privacy than ordinary citizens? Secondly, does knowing a bit more of their personal life help us decide if they're good rulers or influencers? Thirdly, does personal life affect how well they can do their jobs? Or more importantly, what kind of jobs would be affected by their personal reputation? Then we will be moving on to discussing privacy in terms of companies. And we will ask people's opinions on companies storing your personal information and raising the question of, can we really do anything without anyone knowing? So let's begin with the first talking point. Would anyone like to start?
Okay, let me just ask you guys a question, okay? And you guys can just answer. So do you guys think that we should have data privacy?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So does everybody agree, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think certain people in our society actually deserve less privacy than others?
Yeah.
Who would you say, Phoebe?
Prince Andrews. I'm just saying this as an example because recently I've watched the Jeffrey Epstein documentary, Filthy Rich. I don't know if any of you have watched it, but see, the thing is, he's a royal, right? But then he was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, which was a notorious, like, he literally sexually harasses girls as lifestyle. And Prince Andrews was seen on this Jeffrey Epstein's island that was notorious for like raping girls on it's like private islands in the middle of the Mediterranean, and it's notorious for like raping girls on there. And he was seen on there harassing girls and like doing things like this, and he has raped girls who had been sexually trafficked before. And till now, the royals haven't admitted to any of them. In fact, they've publicly denied it. And for like things like this, I think it's very important to know that like even royals or celebrities, they're accountable for their actions as much as we are. You know, and not having privacy and exposing their wrongdoings is important. Like, it's a very important part of it, because having power can mean that you can cover your tracks. And as a role model for your country, you're supposed to be, in my opinion, you need to be even like held to even higher standard than normal people, because you do have a certain audience. Yeah.
I think I agree with Phoebe in the way that people under like scrutiny or in scandal who have certain like platforms and influence towards the people, I think in that situation, they should have less data privacy and less data privacy. So there's more evidence towards these things, and it helps sort of deal with the situation in a way. So nothing is hidden. Like currently in the world, those with influence and power under scrutiny by the general media, by the general masses, they have the ability and the money to hide all of their information.
I think I'd like to expand on that, and I think anybody who's in who's chosen to go to be in a position of power, so maybe in politics or is producing music, something like that. I think they kind of have a responsibility to be a role model, and I think that in that way they kind of have to accept that part of their job role is exposing their personal life to the general public.
You guys made really great points. I just wanted to bring up the fact, like, who do you think would be in the power to be able to decide, like, which person or which people get less privacy than others? Like, what are your ideas?
I think so. I've watched a lot of Congress, like U.S. Congress, like videos just about like how like. Have you all watched the Mark Zuckerberg video where he was scrutinized by like a whole bunch of like congressmen and congresswomen? And I think it's really important to have that kind of platform where people can voice their opinions and like in such a public way. And like I think it's just important to have someone like held accountable for like because okay, I'm so sorry, but see, the thing is, these media tech giants have the power to decide their own company policies, and their company holds so much data and so much information about each individual, and oftentimes it's them who has the power to decide over these things. But then for me, I think it's just very important to have, on a national level or international level, to have some kind of organizations or some kind of like institutions to scrutinize and criticize and have policies in place in order to decide these things, instead of just like private companies deciding by themselves. Yeah. No.
I just want to bring back to Sohana's question. I feel like in situations like these, it really depends, because someone who's under scrutiny, they go to what is supposed to be a non-biased court, but like no matter how honest they say the court are, anyone can be swayed with bribery and with money. So I feel like with this whole thing, there's really no telling what's true and what's not. So like maybe everything should be, I feel like the whole process should be available for the whole world to see, like maybe through video clips, through released what are they called, scripts, like where they write down everything that's being said in the trial. But those things can also be tampered with, so it's a bit of a sticky situation.
This makes me think of a case I remember hearing about where I think a man was suspected of murder or something like that, and the police wanted to access, or the FBI wanted to access his phone, but Apple wouldn't give them the combination to his phone. And I think it's a bit like that, where you think, surely if there's a murder being committed, that would be reasonable grounds to access somebody's information. But Apple as a company decided, no, that goes against our consumer regulations.
You all raised again really interesting points. And Zara, Nora, you're completely right that it's really iffy situation. It's very situational. There's no set of guidelines and rules that we can use for every celebrity or influencer or person in politics. But do you think, does anyone else have anything to add to this talking point? Perhaps something about what do you think about like the privacy of royals in comparison to those of ordinary citizens? Zara.
I was just thinking, like, how are they supposed to regulate this? If let's say there's a criminal, how are they supposed to regulate how much privacy that they can take? But then again, it's like a bit complicated. Now I'm thinking about it. It's just like, I think maybe the way to go is that if they have other evidence that they've committed this thing, then maybe they can go. I think this gets a bit tricky if they're just going off like, if they're suspected of murder. Maybe if they have other evidence, maybe then that would be more acceptable than they can go if they have more evidence to suspect them of doing something. I don't know. It's just a thought.
But how would evidence be collected if the person in trial like retains their privacy? How are they supposed to collect other evidence if like nothing can be released because that's their private rights?
Maybe like DNA testing on the crime scene. Like that's what I meant by other evidence. Like not like communication and stuff like that. I mean like they've seen them on security cameras, or they've seen their DNA testing, or they've been at that location at that specific time. I mean like non like computer stuff is what I meant. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Okay, do you guys think that some people, like for their jobs, such as royals and celebrities, if their personal reputation is on the line because they're being watched, they will actually, let's bring this back to like generally, like all of us, think of yourselves and the people around you. Would you behave any differently if you knew you were being watched? Like if you knew that, okay, you didn't have any doors to your house, do you think you would act any differently?
I think this is really interesting because I remember doing research about Amazon and things like the Alexa Home, and there was like a drone doorbell system, and it really hit home to me how close that kind of what I'd always sort of quite a futuristic circumstance where we're all surveillance culture could be a reality. And yes, I think people would act differently, and you'd like to believe that there'd be less crimes and things like that because people would be held accountable, but I think it would just be paranoia all the time.
Yes, I agree with Ali. Okay, Noor?
Ali mentioned something about surveillance state. I think unknowingly we already do live in one because of all the electronic appliances we have in our house. Anyone can get through anything at this point in time. But I think while some privacy should be retained for like the general public, I think it would also influence maybe better behavior because everyone's under scrutiny of everyone in a way.
Yep, go ahead, Alia.
Really coming off from that point, it gets me wondering about the people who are mentally ill as well, because we see schizophrenia, for example, as a kind of paranoia. And so I was wondering how we would even bring up the topic that people will be under surveillance at all times, and that could potentially actually be another leading cause to mental illnesses and mental illness outbreaks.
I think Ali is right there, and I think you only really need to think about celebrities and the paparazzi, and the length that paparazzi will go to kind of infiltrate somebody's privacy. And then I think people like Princess Diana and even the Britney Spears breakdown moment, where that amount of pressure and the constant public eye can drive people to do crazy things and completely break down.
So actually, okay, Zara, you can. Okay, I don't know who raised your hand first, but Zara can go first, and then Noor.
I would just kind of add that I think not only would it lead to mental health problems, I think it would also lead. I think in some ways could lead to a increase in crime, because I don't think it would be more physical crime. I think it would be more cyber crime, since you basically have eyes everywhere. And I think that if someone can hack into that, they can pretty much do whatever.
I just want to bring it back to Ellie's point about Britney Spears and how constantly being in the eyes of the public can lead to mental health issues and more breakdowns and things. I think relating to privacy, especially in Britney Spears' case, she has no control over her private life, right? She's she's in contract to sign with her agency and her father. So I think things like that with celebrities especially There's so many things going on behind the scenes that we don't really know about, and so many of like our favorite musicians, our favorite idols, are really suffering because of the tight constraints of the media and being in the public eye. So I wonder if anyone like could think of solutions to something like that, a way to retain privacy, but at the same time not be completely hidden from the world.
Yeah, actually, okay, yes, Ellie, please go.
I wanted to add on to Noah's point that it's like right now with social media, what we kind of see is the majority of people's highlights. And I think in a world where you could see everybody's all the time, it would be really interesting because you'd suddenly get to see all of the terrible sides of people and not just their highlights all the time. So I don't know whether that would have less pressure by social media or more. I'm not really sure about that one.
Ellie, that's actually such a good point. I think that's the first positive point we had about not having as much data privacy in the future. But there's something that I also want to bring up actually. So it's okay that you guys haven't seen the resource, but there was this one court case. Basically, have you guys seen like the Grinch, the Year the Grinch movie that we usually watch during Christmas? Right?
Yeah, the Grinch is so Christmas.
Yeah, I think one of the young actresses is like, her name is Catherine Zeta-Jones or whatever, and so she was getting married in the UK, and she had a deal with one of the magazines, I think it was OK Magazine, that she would give all of her wedding photos exclusively to that magazine, so nobody was allowed to take any photos. But one of the waiters was actually an undercover like reporter for a different magazine. It was Hello Magazine, and then they sued them because obviously the deal with OK Magazine fell through, and it was like a £1 million deal. But they kind of like said that this was like a breach to their privacy. This is an invasion of privacy, and which is in the Human Rights Act. But the problem is that in the UK, they don't really have any privacy rights. So what happened next was that Hello Magazine came back and was like, actually, I have a freedom of expression. So what do you guys think the outcome of the case was? Who do you think would win? The paparazzi with the freedom of expression, or do you think it would be the invasion of privacy with that actress's wedding? You can type in the chat if you want. Okay, so Phoebe said Hello Magazine would win, and Noor said the paparazzi would lose, and then Ellie said same, the paparazzi would lose. Sohana, would you like to go ahead?
Oh, no, you can continue about the case and I'll talk after.
Oh, no, I'm done. I just wanted to hear everybody's opinions.
So, okay, well, actually, it's a really interesting point how Asyirah brought up this case study, because it's sort of like, I wanted to bring up the question, which one would you argue against, like, so your freedom of expression or your freedom to privacy, like, which one do you think is more important? Which one would supersede the other? And yes, Phoebe, you can.
I was just going to say, I think that Hello Magazine would win because since there are no privacy laws in the UK, I'd assume that it'd be extremely difficult for the celebrity to get any sort of form of justice, because I don't see what other than privacy would infringe upon. So unfortunately, I do think that the paparazzis will win.
Oh, who's leaving? Okay, never mind.
Noor, you can go.
I think what Phoebe said is true, but in terms of like corporate contracts, there's a lot of loopholes. So I feel like while Hello Mag does necessarily have a strong foundation of freedom of expression in terms of contracts and like business, I don't really know how to phrase it, corporate contracts, I suppose it would be, they sort of have a stronger defense in a way. So I feel like it would be harder for Hello Mag to win because it's more of an unstable defense.
But even though they would have a stronger defense, do you guys personally think that the actress should have had her privacy at her own wedding? You think that was her right?
Yes.
I think so, and it's harder because she gave rights to the other magazine. If she hadn't given rights to any magazine, then it would be quite clear that was an invasion of privacy. But no, I do think that the actress or actor should have had the right.
So this links really well with our like first discussion point about do celebrities like deserve less privacy, sort of, because there's this common attitude in our world where it's sort of like, you know, you're famous, so you're asking for it. Like, obviously, if you're getting married and you're famous, then people are going to post photos about it and talk about it. So, like, what do you guys think of that? Because, yeah, it's her wedding, their wedding, and they would like it to be private, and they gave only one magazine the rights, but because they're famous, people all over the world and all different other magazines and stuff are going to try and get their hands on the photos. Yes, Alia, you can go.
I think it really is an invasion of privacy because although they are famous and they are on the internet for a lot of people to see, this is kind of a private thing in a private life. They are also, as humans, entitled to a private life, no matter the job or description that they have going on for them. And I really think that they should have at least some form of privacy that they're able to enjoy, especially for personal reasons like their wedding, as you said.
Yes, I completely agree. I just think that it's very hard in the world we live in to keep things private, especially celebrities, because people want to know what they're doing, what they're eating, and everything. It's just crazy. Like, there's sort of an obsession. Yes, Nora, please go ahead.
I just want to add on to your point. I think you're completely correct. These people do deserve privacy, but it is going to be tricky in this world because even though laws may be set where, okay, this person can have their wedding be completely private, you know, there's still really no way to avoid espionage. Like how you mentioned the undercover waitress actually being someone from another magazine. It's a big problem in today's society, especially with celebrities, with corporations, you know, that sort of thing, like corporate espionage. But I'm not really sure what measures can be taken against that because, like, even if you're like, okay, we'll research background history, you know, we'll research previous workplaces, previous jobs, previous communications, you know, all of that can be faked. All of that can be scripted, built up. So I'm not really sure how we can have a completely, you know, private situation for people in those positions.
So, Noor, remember when you said earlier, how would we control that? You know, to still have like a little bit of data privacy, but still with a little bit of transparency, because like Ellie said, it would be helpful to see also the lows and not just the highs of people's lives. Wait, oh my gosh, I kind of lost my point. But perhaps we could, you know how legal documents, and like when you read the terms and conditions, they seem so complicated and they seem so boring because it's all just in black and white and it's just so long and it's just so like worded in such a complicated way in legal jargon. So perhaps one way that we could combat this is if we were to have like two sets of one other set of that terms and conditions, you know, the fine print that we can't really see what they're actually taking from us, and we could simplify that in a much more visual way, because in this day and age we are like so addicted to visuals. Like I think it's much more attractive because we go on Instagram and loads of people are on Instagram, and I think everybody would agree they're becoming more attracted to visuals rather than just words. So I think one way to combat this is if we were to have like just a short section rather than having like a full terms and conditions to be given to everybody, because not everybody can read and understand the way a lawyer would read and understand. Okay. Who's going next? Yeah.
Can I say?
Yeah. Noor, and then Sohana, and then Ellie.
I completely agree with Asyirah. Because I think in those situations, it would make it more understandable, not only just for regular people, but for those with learning disabilities or those who are neurodivergent. So in that situation, they'd also be able to understand what they're signing up for, what they're signing away, what they're getting, what they're not getting. Because I feel like the format, like right now in this day and age, is slightly discriminatory and exclusive to certain groups of people.
I just wanted to ask, like, who out of like the group of us that are here actually reads the terms and conditions when you're signing something and like agreeing to something?
Oh, I actually read them.
I don't. I mean, sure, you're an exception. Everyone's pretty much saying no, and I think that's why I agree with Ashira's point. Visuals are definitely more appealing. Just like how when we advertised this discussion, we focused a lot on the visuals to get people's attention. But the thing is, one thing I did consider when Asyirah was speaking was that if companies want to secretly have this loophole where they can sort of take your data without you realizing in these terms and conditions, and they know you usually don't read it and you usually just say yes, then wouldn't they not want to do the visual thing? Because like if your companies would have to make these visual things, like simplified version of the terms and conditions, but if they don't agree to doing it, then what would you propose as a solution? Like just reading the thing, but if some people don't want to read, then what are you going to do?
I think this might be a bit too complicated, but I think there should be a non-governmental organization that would dedicate themselves to making it simpler for other people to read, and like basically making these terms and conditions in a much more concise and like visual way. But I feel like it is quite, hypocritical for me to say like, oh, someone else should do it and not me,
Yeah, I totally get that. Maybe an NGO is kind of like stretching too far, but I know what you mean about getting like an organization to oversee it. I had a point and I forgot it. Okay, Ellie, you can go.
I completely agree with Asyirah, and I think we really need better education in schools. Personally, I've had quite relatively good kind of like cyber education. I've been very lucky in that, but a lot of people aren't. And again, I think that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. But yeah, so I think we need better education in school about digital safety and data and what different companies kind of do in that way. And I think also we could have like a central regulation, like governing body of some sort. Like I know we have different countries have like food regulation that assess what the manufacturers can and can't put in packages and things like that. So I think it would be really beneficial to have a way of doing that with the big tech companies, even though I know it's not that possible currently.
That's a really, really interesting point. You're right. Schools actually should educate their students on privacy and just everything on the internet and how to actually use the internet properly and safely. I did wonder though, what do you think about kids using technology and these privacy like terms and conditions? If kids at the age of 10 and 11 have an iPad and start downloading these apps, and some of them might not even realize what these apps actually entail, and downloading them because it looks just fun and I want to play a game, but don't realize that the apps actually take their data from the iPad. What do you guys think about that? Like young kids, should there be some restrictions from parents, or should there be restrictions on the iPad? Is it sort of like the should companies be aware of this and the ones that have the regulations already in place for young kids, or is it like the parents' responsibility?
Yeah. Also, when you guys are answering Sahana's question about should kids have like their own technology and at what age, can I just ask, what age did you guys have your own like personal technology?
Can I answer?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just to answer your question, Asyirah, I think maybe I was about 12 or 13. And then to go back to Sohana's point, I think there is already like tablets made for children that you can buy, but I feel like on the iPad, there should definitely be age restrictions, and parents should find out a way to monitor carefully, like the content that the children are consuming. But so many of the apps we use just on the daily, like games, apps like Facebook, apps like, I know some people play PUBG. All of those apps steal information, but just because they're big apps, we still use them. And so many more apps that we may not know about do the same thing. So I feel like it's kind of hard to avoid in a way.
Yes, that's a really, really good point that I was going to actually bring up later in the discussion, but it's fine that we're talking about it now. A lot of these apps that we use in our daily life take data from us, but I'm assuming all of you still use these apps because you're active on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever it is, WhatsApp. So are you guys, by using these apps, are you guys indirectly saying then that you're okay with companies stealing your data?
I think during the quarantine period, it's, I think, really heightened the amount of time that people are spending on these sort of apps, because it's kind of inevitable if you want to, communicate with people who are outside of, in your immediate circle. But I think it's pretty unavoidable in today's day and age, and that's really sad. And then to answer Asyirah's question, I think I was probably 13 or 14, so I'm quite thankful for that. And I think it's also not just the data that you're giving, but also the content you're consuming, because I think, young children being exposed to kind of everything that's out there on the internet and on social media can be really, really damaging. I remember one of my fourth grade assembly, and they said the internet is like the wild, wild west, kids, because there's no cowboys out there, nobody's regulating it, and it's just stuck with me. So
Yeah, I think 13 or 14 is actually a really good age. Sohana, do you want to go into the next point?
Oh yeah, about your question, I actually got one of those Nokia phones, the ones where you had to click the button 3 times to get to the third letter. And I could only send text or call my parents when I was, I think, 11. And then a couple years later, I got my sister's old iPhone. So that's sort of my story of devices. But obviously, being born in 2003, that was sort of I'm assuming most of us are the same age. So that was kind of what it was like. But nowadays, kids at the age of 5, maybe not 5, but 6 or 7, they literally have a iPhone 9. I mean, not 9, 8. So times have changed, even though we were only born 17 years ago. So it's interesting to see that how things are shifting really fast. And yes, Alia, you can go.
Okay, so I may be a little bit different from everyone here, but when I was about 5, I think, I got my first device from my mom. Me and my sister had an iPhone 3G, if I'm correct. And our mom used to monitor our devices most of the time because, we were kids and we didn't know what we were doing. And she was really also big on technology. She was really informed with this. So it was really... we were assured that we weren't doing anything that could be, potentially harmful. And I think, yeah, it's really, really different nowadays. As Sohana said, that, things are changing very drastically. And although nowadays kids are getting phones and stuff like that, I think it is still the parents' responsibility to monitor these things because, like we said, kids, they're new to this stuff and they don't really know what they're doing. So if the parent is not really conscious of that fact, and if the parent is not actually being educated enough, because at some points in life we do see teenagers who get pregnant and have teenage pregnancies. Not to say that any of them are dumb or don't know the internet safety, but most of them neglect it. Like we brought up about TikTok and stuff like that, because people just don't care if these companies are stealing their information, even though we've put out that, oh, TikTok is stealing your private data, oh, TikTok is doing this and that, but no one is really caring. So I feel that this could be a danger to most kids as well. So thank you.
Good point, Alia. Ellie?
I couldn't agree more. And I think, okay, apps like things like Omegle, where kids can go online and it's a fun thing and it's designed to be a fun thing, and they meet absolute completely strangers. And it's actually, I think, a sexual app. And I remember, I think, as young as year 7 on the school computers, it was the fun thing to do. And I have friends now who do that. But the thought of me is like 12 or 13, nothing bad happened, but it could have very easily. And so when you think of, really young kids going on and meeting these people online, that's really scary.
I just want to bring up the point that actually, Alia, my experience with devices was similar like yours, but except my parents never monitored my, like, what I was doing online. And comparing that with Sohana, who got such a really old phone where you couldn't really do much at a later age than I did. I think we can see that now because Sohana is not really as addicted to her devices as I am, and I have brothers who are 5 years old and they're addicted to your phones every day, and it's so hard to control them because they cry really, really loud for days if we take away their phones to make them study and stuff. And I feel like I know what it's like because my parents don't monitor my online activity, so I have that responsibility. And I tell them you can't download this app because it's 18 plus, and then they don't understand because it's just a game to them. So, and TikTok and stuff. So I don't know if 5 and 10-year-olds should really be on TikTok. Thank you, Zara. Nora, would you like to go next?
Yes, please. I just want to bring up, because you were talking about monitoring your children's phone usage. I just want to bring up that, has anyone seen that one Black Mirror episode where there was the tablet and the mother could monitor her daughter's actions, and it led to this big violent outbreak because the child felt like they were under constant scrutiny? Does anyone know that episode?
Yeah.
I feel like in the way Zahana's parents introduced her to technology is the way more parents should do it, because monitoring can also become obsessive. But while children should be controlled and contained and hidden from certain things on the internet, at the same time they should be given a slight amount of freedom. Otherwise it could lead to, they'll act out later on in life because they feel like they were never given that opportunity in childhood.
I do have to raise the point though. I did have an iPad when I was younger before I got a phone. I think I got one at the age of 6 or 7. And I don't really remember my parents restricting me on downloading apps or anything. I sort of just never really downloaded anything that I think was wrong, hopefully. It was just watching stuff and talking to friends. But in terms of social media, I literally used to use email to contact my friends up until I was around 9 or 10. I didn't have Instagram, Snapchat, or anything like that before that, before the age of 11 or 12. So I think it's just, again, an interesting thing to show how some of you got phones really early and possibly even social media at a lot earlier age, whereas I got social media quite at like a, let's say, decent age. From what we've sort of like discussed, like Alia said and Asyirah said, that maybe it sort of contributes to how I am now. And yeah, Asyirah's right. I really am not addicted to apps. I can live without them. They're nice to look at, but I'm not addicted. And I know that some people are. And especially in this lockdown time that we've had, you can really tell how some people have gone to overusing their phones because they're at home and they're like, oh, I have nothing to do. And you have a group of people who've actually reduced going on their phone significantly. Oh, Alia, would you like to speak?
Yeah.
One thing though, after Alia, we're going to move on to the next talking point. So Alia, please go.
Okay. So, oh God, I completely forgot what I was going to talk about. But
It's okay.
I'm
Just
so
take a
sorry.
minute. Just take a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Sorry to anyone who's watching this on YouTube.
Right. Okay. I've got it now. Okay. So when I was younger, I didn't have access to Facebook or stuff like that because my dad and my mom were both really, really strict about that, and I'm gonna admit it, I did actually go onto Facebook and created my own account separately, but I deleted it because I felt like I was going against my parents' word and stuff like that. Until my dad, when I was 12, he decided that okay, you're old enough and to make your own email and make your own Facebook account. So he gave me that right, and I felt like I was also quite I felt that I wanted to be on there all the time because I wasn't allowed that freedom, that right to be able to go onto social media. And that's why I feel like nowadays I'm so addicted to social media. Like, even though I won't post, even though I won't comment and stuff like that, I'll just be on it just because I have nothing better to do. And because, like, I just feel like maybe someone else is doing something fun that I could see, that I could, even though it's subconsciously, I still think it and I still do it, even though I probably think, oh, it's just boredom, so, I'm just going to go on it. But subconsciously, I'm thinking, I really need to go onto this app and I really, really, really need to go back to it. And this also ties into the fact that, people are using psychological methods like subliminal messaging, and Facebook has been in that area with subliminal messaging because of that article that was put out on it. So I feel like these apps, even though people have not really been exposed for it yet, these apps could still be using psychological methods like that in order to get people to come back on it and be addicted to it. So that's just my take on it.
Okay, Ellie, go first.
Okay, for our last point on this, I completely agree. And I think it's because we kid ourselves that you kid yourself that you're connecting. I think often, by seeing other people's lives on Facebook or Instagram, you confuse it with, real, genuine connection. And I think because social media and, the rise of the internet has only been in the last, 20, 30 years, really, that it's become such an integral part of our life. We have no idea of the long-term effects yet. And we are the first generation, I suppose, that's really had it our entire lives. So we won't really know until we have kids what the impact of that is long-term.
And I agree with both of you. I'm just going to reply to Alia's point and then Ellie's point. So first, Alia, I totally agree because sometimes I tell myself I can't go on Instagram because I have so much to do, so I won't let myself, even if I want to, even if I have time, to relax and do whatever I want. And it's always just, okay, I have to do work and I can only study. And then that's why when I have so much free time, even when I'm not interested in Instagram, I will just keep scrolling. I'm not actually thinking, I'm just scrolling and I'm watching the same post like over and over again pop up. And Ellie, I agree with you as well. I think it's sort of like being able to get a glimpse of people's lives that you sometimes don't really know that well, and you think by seeing what they post and what they're doing, where they're eating or whatever, it like you think you know them better, and it's kind of like how people were obsessed in the past with celebrities. I think they are still obsessed with celebrities, but like it's like having a tabloid for um, like ordinary people, your friends, and who's in your class that you don't really talk to. It's just like having a tabloid magazine but for ordinary people.
I think what Asyirah just said is really, really interesting. I never used to really see it that way until like up until recently, where like you sort of use your social media. Like everyone sort of has a tendency to like post like everything everything they do on social media, and other people are sort of obsessed with the fact that like, oh, I gotta know what my friends are doing. I'll see their stories, I'll see their posts, and things like that. But like, do you think it's really important in the grand scheme of things? Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether you know what your friends are doing or celebrities, but does knowing a little bit about their lives sort of help you understand them better, like what they post on Instagram? Because some people, like, I know are quite like different on social media than they are in real life. Like, what do you guys think about that? Like the portrayal of one's persona on social media.
Do you guys personally act a little bit different on social media than online, or like are you more open, or are you like more reserved? Or when you're texting someone, do you act differently than talking in real life? Okay, Alia.
Okay. Yeah, I personally feel like, to be honest, I have a ton of different personas. I'm not gonna lie. I'm usually a little bit more open on social media, but I do keep private stories for when I'm most really open to my friends that I really, really trust. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people do keep different personas at hand just because we as humans, we're social creatures and we are able to adapt to different environments. So I feel like, if I were to see, let's say, Asyirah, you were kind of like a snobby person, just not to say that you are, okay, just an example, let's say that. So I would act accordingly to how you would like me to act. There's like a non-verbal agreement that that's how you're supposed to act, even though I really don't need to be that way. I feel the need to be able to match your energy in order to be around you. So I feel like that's just my take on it.
Were you talking about real life back just now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, but all of this, like, being able to connect with people all over the world, like, WhatsApp video call and phone call, like, we just have to connect to Wi-Fi. We don't necessarily have to pay. Like, back then, it was so expensive to make an international phone call. Do you think it's worth it to have your data and privacy compromised in exchange to have all these free apps?
That's a really difficult one. That's a really difficult one because personally, most of my close friends are in the UK, and being a student, there's no way that I can afford to go see them, or I wouldn't be able to communicate them if it wasn't for apps like Snapchat and Instagram. Do I think it's worth it? I don't know. I wouldn't want to not have them in my life. So at the moment, there isn't really an alternative.
Alia, do you want to go first, and then I'll go after you?
Okay, yeah. Building on Ali's point, I do feel like some people just really don't care at that point because, as we said, we're students, and most people also prefer a cheaper alternative, and they get persuaded into thinking that, oh, this alternative will be better nonetheless. There are sacrifices, but I really want to talk to this person. So I feel like really people just don't care anymore if that is the case, because as we see going around, like I'm going to bring up TikTok again, but people just really don't care about their privacy, even though they say they do, but they're still using these apps and still using these things to communicate with people and not really think about how it will affect them in the future.
I completely agree with the both of you. Ellie, it's an extremely difficult question, and Alia, again, people know that these apps are taking their data, but they're still using these apps. So what's the solution to this problem then? Do we create new apps that can mimic Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, but without data protection? The data stealing of data by the companies. But also that's just a point I wanted to raise, and I also wanted to link what we're talking about to one of the resources for this week's discussion. So one of the resources was a TED Talk titled "I Have Nothing to Hide," and I think Asyirah would have something to say about it if she'd like to speak about it, because she's going next.
Okay. Hold on. What was my point? Okay, so I think actually there isn't really a point to making a different app that will not steal our data, because, okay, there is a list of mergers and acquisitions by Facebook that you can find on Wikipedia, which I wanted to link to the resources, but I forgot to. But I can link, it's really long. And Facebook, essentially, they will take over any app that will compete with them, and then they will just they even took over this one company that basically just it's like a public they own everything, like Sohana said. It's like a surveillance camera. They just look at whatever people are doing and they take it when there isn't really a need for Facebook to do that, and there isn't really a point to making another app. And Ellie was right that there isn't really an alternative right now, but I think that because the majority of these companies, they're so powerful because we use them. It's us. We're the ones that are actually in control, but we don't realize it. Everybody around us is using it, and if everybody on Facebook, on all the other apps that Facebook actually owns, like Instagram and WhatsApp, if we just demand that to stop, they will stop because they won't want to lose any of us. I think if we threaten them, we will just sue you or whatever, it could actually happen, and we don't need to compromise our data and our privacy just to have these free apps. So Hannah, would you like to go next?
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned about basically the whole fact is the world that we live in today, there are some multinational corporations that are more powerful than states, even like governments. That's just the world we live in. Power is distributed really, really unevenly between states and non-state actors. And especially considering the fact that the power of social media, just for example, off the top of my head, the Fridays for Future climate change marches, a hashtag perpetuated this whole movement that's still going on today, considering that we are COVID-19, we're under restrictions and social distancing. It's still sort of going on online, and it's perpetuated leaders to think about things and perpetuated a lot of people who honestly don't really care about climate change, and it's changed a couple of people's perceptions on climate change. So I just think that, again, the power of social media is really, really strong, and we're sort of just at the beginning of it. Who knows what's going to happen in a couple of years and in 10 years? We can't really say. It's kind of scary, actually.
Going back to that point, and also remember when Noor earlier said, how could we make it easier for people to be more informed? I think maybe, perhaps, do you guys think, this is what I want to ask, do you guys think schools should provide law classes for everybody, so sort of explaining in simpler terms what laws are and what's actually legal and what's not, and then do you guys think that? Yeah, Alia, please go.
I really do think that schools especially, should be able to do that. But the thing is, education comes with a price, and nothing is ever free. So I really do feel that that will be very hard for government schools to be able to get actual access to that education, even though everything is on the internet. But it's still people can't really access that, and getting that information could be quite hard for some people. And some kids also just don't care. It's a lot of legal stuff, and people just don't want to read about it, just like how we're not reading about these contracts. So really, I don't think there will be much difference, but there will also be that thought subconsciously, I guess, in their head that, oh, I learned this in law class. But most kids will also not be able to get that access to education, like third world countries won't.
That's like a really, really interesting point. But that before I go into detail about that would like bring us to a whole other debate. But I think access to education is, again, a whole different topic. But you're right in that not everyone would be able to host these classes. So do you think that maybe it's the role of, it's the government's, what's the word? It's like their job to do it, or the government or parents or just like anyone on social media? Do you think like a NGO could just create a sort of page on Instagram and then give all these rules? Do you think that would be a more effective way?
Yeah, I feel like that would be quite effective because everyone's on the internet nowadays. So that is a solution. But if we're going to talk about the government is also a part of that stealing data and information. So I feel like it wouldn't really make sense that they would provide that. And plus, education to that is very, very expensive. And if everyone is getting that similar education, no one can really manipulate. And that leaves really zero room for anyone else to manipulate these individuals, which then, causes quite an outbreak within the stock markets, and our economy could potentially fall.
I think that's a really interesting point. However, I actually have been doing some research for something else, and I actually came across a statistic that says, I think it was 41% of the world, of the population of the world. I think this was taken in April 2020. So as of April 2020, 41% of the world's population do not have access to internet. So I think that we often overgeneralize saying that a lot of people have access to the internet because that's what we tend to do because we're at a position of privilege, but we don't realize there's a lot of places in the world that don't have access to internet. But that's like just a side point. Asyirah, you can go.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring back about how we can protect our privacy and data even more. Just linking back to how the Yemen crisis, I thought that everybody knew about it, and it wasn't like everybody's kind of ignored it at first, but actually a lot of people didn't know until I saw in the comments under Instagram, when they made it so easy to read and so visually pleasing and so easy to access, that we can link back to Sohana and Ellie's point on how powerful social media is, and we don't actually know how powerful it is until generations to come, because we are the first generation to experience it. Sohana?
Again, that's a really, really interesting point, and one that I often think about. A lot of what we see on social media is very, very Western, orientated. It's just focused on the West, and only really I say in quotation, big stuff that happens in the Middle East or Africa or Asia makes it on the news. But let's be honest here, everything that happens in the US always makes it into the news, mostly. So do you think then our news is sort of biased? Because I know that there have been protests in Serbia, and nothing at all, nothing. There was nothing in the news. It was just the only reason why people actually knew about it outside of Serbia was because someone in Serbia made Twitter thread about it, and that blew up on Twitter, and then everyone found out. But it's still not as talked about in comparison to other things. So I do agree that a lot of things go underlooked.
I do feel like the point about government is also relevant to what you've just said, because, not everybody has the right to freedom of speech, as, that's only really a thing within Western countries. And I don't think people realize that whenever Westerners come over to Asia, I feel like they think they have the right to speak their minds all the time. And we also see a lot of Westerners on the internet, go absolutely crazy with their parents because they have a freedom of speech. Unlike most Asians, we do not. We tend to have this stigma around face and the act of keeping face and being able to keep your family status high because you have a good name. And I feel like really the government is also involved in censorship within these countries, these Asian countries, or third world countries. Because of that, not many people are able to, know about it, and really there's no access to it because the government censors it, and they censor the news, they censor lots of resources that would probably put this out, but could not because of the government.
Again, Alia, sorry, really, really interesting point. I did, however, want to bring up the fact that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, under Article 19, does state that everyone has a right to freedom of opinion and expression. And if I'm not mistaken, 193 countries are part of the UN. So it's sort of funny, for the lack of a better word, to see that it is a human right, but it's not being followed through in a lot of places. I feel like we've sort of strayed away from our topic about privacy. But do you guys have anything else you'd like to say about the right to privacy? Because I wouldn't want to keep you guys for too long.
Not really. I just think that it's really something that we should be more worried about. The human population in general, because it's a real impending thing that's going to happen sooner or later. Is that we're going to have all of our details everywhere, and it's quite alarming that people aren't worried about it right now. So I hope there's more awareness about how much of our data these big companies are stealing currently.
I completely agree. It is scary that it's happening, and it's also scary that a lot of people are just letting it happen, if that makes sense. I'd just like to ask one question before we wrap up today's discussion. How do you guys, I think I know what answer you'd give to this question, but I'd like to know a little bit about your opinion after you answer the yes or no. So do you think that we can really do anything without anyone knowing? And so, can you expand on what you think?
I mean, I think if we were, I have a diary, so I can really write whatever I want, and that way it's on paper. But obviously, if someone were to find that, then they can open it. Wait, so now I'm kind of, confused. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. You first like to think yes, right? That obviously there's some things that are personal to you and that no one else will know. Like it's in your head. But then, have you ever thought about the fact that they're creating technology where they can read your dreams?
Wow.
There's the or am I just dumb and that's just fiction? I'm not sure actually. But imagine if that was true. If you think that anything you write or anything you've done can obviously someone can see it. So then you're like, okay, my dreams are the only things that I know about and that no one else knows about. But then they create this technology where they can see your dreams, and I don't know, it could be typed as into a script and stuff like that. What do you think about that?
I think I'm going to be having nightmares.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this whole discussion has been on the right of privacy, but we've also gone to other. It's been really, really interesting.
But this is the official ending. So this is the end of week 4. We discussed the right to privacy. If you're tuning in and listening and you would like to access the resources we spoke about today, please visit our website, theopenbook.car.co, which is and there's a link to a resources folder where you can access all of the resources we talked about from the beginning of week 1.